First, we need to have a clear understanding of what fiction is. And most people are like, oh, it's just things that aren't true, right? But it's a little bit more complicated than that. So according to the Google Dictionary, fiction is a text in the form of prose, especially short stories and novels, that describes imaginary events and people. What is prose? No, what's that?
Wait, what does it say?
In the form of prose.
Stories?
Yeah, it's written in a story form, okay? It's not like a poem where it's lines. It's a full-blown paragraph, okay? So the characteristics of fiction, you have a traditional plot formulas and character arcs, literal writing, which you can take it for what it says, right? Literal means what I put down, that's what it means. Limited use of symbolism and allegories. Allegories are short stories with hidden meanings. Symbolism, if used, is clear and easily understood by most readers. So, for example, an easy symbol would be the American flag. What does it stand for?
America.
America, right? Pretty easy, okay? So, tends to be written in the form of mysteries, horror stories, science fiction, and romances, okay? Some of these types of texts you don't have to read too much into, right? It is what it is, especially like romances. Have you ever picked up a book where you're like, oh, I feel like I've read this story before, and then you start seeing that it has the same like arc, it has the same pattern, right? They just put different characters. That's regular fiction. However, in this class, we're going to be focusing mostly on literary fiction. So there is a difference, and I want you to be very clear on what that difference is. Hold on one second. Okay. So literary fiction, on the other hand, is fiction that tends to follow non-conventional plot structures while containing embedded symbolism and allegories. What do I mean by non-conventional?
Like not the usual.
Yeah, not the usual. It doesn't follow the normal set pattern. It is very different, and you're going to see how that is, okay? Embedded symbolism and allegories. What does embedded mean?
Put into.
Yeah, like it's combined within the story, and they're not going to be as easily understood. So some of the characteristics of literary nonfiction, they tend to be character-focused narratives, symbolism, metaphors, and allegories, which are, again, stories hidden with meanings. They're not as easily understood. You kind of have to analyze them. Vocabulary that inspires imagery, ambiguous or inexact plot points and conclusions. So a lot of times, literary nonfiction will leave you kind of like on a cliffhanger, or you're not quite sure what's happening, and it leaves it to the reader, okay? So it's not wrapped up in a pretty bow. Explorations of philosophical themes that target human conditions and the will of nature. So when we talk about philosophy, right, philosophy is the study of thinking and knowledge. So it's a lot of those types of things, the bigger than, right? Who am I? Those type of big things. How do I know that I exist? Is life worth it? Those things. Yes.
How do I know if I exist?
Yeah. So, and then also an exploration of historical and cultural trends and non-fixed plot formulas. Because normally, when you look at a story, you're like, okay, here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end, right? A lot of times, literary nonfiction is going to take you like this. Okay, so it's not going to be as clear cut. Now, when people talk about fiction versus literary fiction is considered superior in the academic world. It's the types of books that you read in school, in college, right? Fiction, on the other hand, is the one that's more popular. Those are the books we pick up for leisure, or most people pick up for leisure, right? Because Miss Garcia's a nerd, so she has to pick up literary fiction to enjoy herself, because I like my brain to work that way. But most people will just buy simple, easy stories, right? So the way I want you to think about it is literary fiction tends to endure throughout time, where fiction is momentarily popular. But literary fiction lasts longer, right? Because normally regular fiction, it's it's a product of its time, right? You have to be within that time to understand it. Literary fiction are those types of books that have themes and ideas that no matter what age you put it in, it still works. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So I also agree that literary fiction is the best genre of writing, but I do think it also is my business. So, and I ask any of you that don't agree with me to prove me wrong. So now here's where it kind of gets a little boring for people. Again, I promise you'll live. We're gonna get through it together. I don't think it's boring, but I'm pretty sure some of you are gonna want to go to sleep. I ask that you don't. Again, there's gonna be a quiz over it. Today you do need to go ahead and put your first and last name in there so I can make sure that you have looked at it, so I can give you credit. So, literary nonfiction. We're going to go over all its time periods and isms. Now, I have provided excerpts. I may not read all of them, but you can look at them just to see what I'm talking about, okay? So, we're going to start off with the classical period. A long, long, long time ago. So this is, I want you to think of more like the Greeks.
Greek mythology?
Greek mythology, those types of things, yes. So the characteristics of the classical period are an economy for words. So it's saying more with less, or at least that's what they say. But if you actually look at a lot of Greek mythology or Greek stories, they're pretty long, okay? Subtlety of thought. So the ideas aren't right there on the surface for you. You kind of have to dig for them to kind of get the ideas. And attention to form. And they had a very strict form that they followed. And in a lot of ways, it looks like a poem because of the way it's structured, but it's not. Some so well-known authors in text, Homer. Has anybody ever heard of Homer? No? Okay.
Simpson?
Not Homer Simpson, I promise. He wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, and then Virgil, which is the Aeneid.
Oh,
The Odyssey,
I've read the Odyssey.
Yeah, the Trojan horse. That's who Homer is. Okay, he came up with that. It's also known as the Homeric or heroic period.
Well, I read the Odyssey too. I didn't know.
Okay. So here's an excerpt from the Iliad. Rage. Seeing goddesses, Achilles' rage, black and murderous, that cost the Greeks incalculable pain, pitched countless souls of heroes into Hades' dark, and left their bodies to rot as feasts for dogs and birds, as Zeus's will was done. Begin with the clash between Agamemnon, the Greek warlord, and the godlike Achilles. Okay, so is that pretty easy to understand?
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot to go into it. But one of the key points is they tend to talk about the gods a lot. So if you see Zeus was a Greek god, right? And it's just the idea of fate and battle and war that tends to come up. Okay? The Aeneid is what happens after the Trojan War. So this is an excerpt from the Aeneid. Tell me the reason, Muse, what was the wound to her divinity, so hurting her that she, the queen of gods, compelled a man remarkable for goodness to endure so many crises, meet so many trials. Can such resentment hold the mind of gods? So again, we see gods, right? Muse. Have you ever heard of a muse?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah. So do you see that it's an otherworldly sense? That the other world, the gods, are interacting with man. Any questions? I promise you we're not reading those in this class right now. Oh, maybe later, okay? The medieval period. Most of us know this as the Dark Ages, okay?
This was good. That's coming up.
So the characteristics of the medieval period, there tend to be unknown authors. We just don't know who wrote them. There's a lot of moral and religious topics and stories of chivalry, the Knights of the Round Table, King Arthur, right? Those types of people. So well-known authors and texts, Dante Alighieri, The Divine Comedy. Geoffrey Chaucer, The Canterbury Tales. Anonymous is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Does anybody know who Sir Gawain was? He was a knight of the Round Table. Okay. The Canterbury Tales. You see the picture back there with the helmet and the shield? That's actually the Canterbury Tales. Okay, I took a whole class on it when I was at UT because that's how much information is in it. Okay. Those texts also tend to be written in what's called Middle and Old English. So, Dante's Inferno is well known throughout the world. Here's an excerpt. In the midway of this our mortal life, I found me in a gloomy wood, astray, gone from the path direct, and into hell, and were no easy task. How savage wild that forest, how robust and rough its growth, which to remember only my dismay renews, in bitterness not far from that. Okay, so
older language.
yes, a lot of the older language, yes. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. There is no author. You don't know who wrote it. At Camelot lay the king, all on Christmas tide, with many a lovely lord and gallant knight beside. And of the table round did the rich brotherhood high revel hold, all right, and mirth was their mood. Oft times on tourney bent those gallants sought the field, and gentle knights in joust with shiver spear and shield. Okay, so what's Camelot? You all know what Camelot is?
Where King Arthur.
Where King Arthur was, right? Tourney, the tournament, the jousting. And then the table round, so the round table, the rich brotherhood, the knights of the round table. Okay? So, we've heard those stories a lot when we were kids. You normally hear them in more simplistic terms, but when you actually look at the stories themselves, they are filled with a lot of language.
Oh, God.
The Renaissance, yes, most of us know the Renaissance, also known as the Reformation period. Okay? We tend to know the Renaissance more for its science and also for its art. Characteristics, reformation of established institutions. What does that mean? Changing the status quo, right? We're going to change from what we knew. What were the institutions of that time? The church.
Oh.
The church, okay? Reliance on reason. Reason is thought, right? Man-centered over religious-centered. So we're shifting. Because remember, the Dark Ages focused on morals. This is the way a right man, the religious man lives. We're moving more to be man-centered. And then scientific thought starts to get introduced. So some well-known are Martin Luther, the 95 Theses. Now, this is not Martin Luther King. This is a white dude from Europe who said, I don't believe that the churches are right. I don't believe that the Catholic Church, which was the predominant church of the time, the Vatican and the Pope, are right. So he writes this and he sets off a reform. That's where you start to get Protestants, things like that. King Henry, with all his wives, have you ever heard of him? You didn't have that many. I think he had like 6, 7. This is, King Henry uses this to help him get his divorce.
Starts with a P or something.
The Protestants. Niccolo Machiavelli. He's also considered a great philosopher. He wrote The Prince. And then Miguel de Cervantes, which is Don Quixote. Okay, have you ever heard of Don Quixote? No? Okay. If you take Spanish classes, you'll hear about it. Okay?
Don't think I didn't take Spanish.
At least I heard about him. Okay. So just some quick excerpts. So The Prince by Machiavelli. You should know, therefore, that there are 2 types of combat, one with laws and the other with force. The first one is proper to man, the second is proper to beasts. But because many times the first is not enough, one must have recourse to the second. For a prince, therefore, it is necessary to know well how to use both the beast and the man. What do you think he's saying?
There's a tactical and just
Strategic and physical, right? Isn't that true? You can't have one without the other. You have to have a balance, okay? And then Don Quixote, Just then, they discovered 30 or 40 windmills in the plain. And as soon as Don Quixote saw them, he said to his squire, "Fortune is guiding your affairs better than we could have ever hoped. Look over there, Sancho Panza, my friend, where there are 30 or more monstrous giants with whom I plan to do battle and to take all their lives, and with their spoils will start to get rich. This is the righteous warfare, and it's the great service to God to rid the earth of such a wicked seed." Okay, so that's what Don Quixote is known for. A lot of times you're going to see images where you'll see windmills, and you're going to see him on his horse with a saber. Because he, in his mind, sees these windmills as giants. And he has a whole bunch of adventures that he thinks are these knightly adventures, and they're not. Okay? Moving forward. The Enlightenment. What does Enlightenment mean?
Like something shows up or you can see clearly.
Yeah, to see things through like new thought. Right? It just sounds bright and enlightened. Right? So, characteristics, human reason as a guide. So remember, it starts to get introduced before. Now it really takes center stage. Emphasis on rational and orderly universe. Reinforced hierarchical societal structures and behaviors. What does that mean? Exactly. So think about the time when there was like a king, then there was dukes, then there was the barons and landowners, and then where you fit into society. It's trying to reinforce this is where you go, right? Yeah, kind of, yeah, but no. And satire. Satire is a form of comedy, right?
Show.
Yeah, so it's where you take real life things and then you kind of like make fun of them in a very witty way. Okay, so you think if you don't realize it's satire, you might think, oh, it's trying to say this, but in reality, it's poking fun. Well-known authors are Voltaire by Candide and Daniel Defoe, Robinson Crusoe. This is also known as the neoclassical period. What does neo mean?
Right.
New. So it's the new classical. Right? So we have Candide by Voltaire. In the castle of Baron Thunderton Tronket in Westphalia, there once lived a youth endowed by nature with the gentlest of characters. His soul was revealed in his face. He combined rather sound judgment with great simplicity of mind, and was for this reason, I believe, that he was given the name of Candide. The old servants of the household suspected that he was the son of the baron's sister by good and honorable gentlemen of the vicinity, whom this lady could never marry because he could prove only 71 generations of nobility, the rest of his family tree having been lost owing to the ravages of time. So do you see any irony in here? You know what irony is?
Nice.
Yeah, or like kind of satirical, because it's saying that he's a sound judgment, but he's also simple-minded. Okay? That there was a good man that she was pregnant by. She has a kid, but he's not good enough because he only has 71 generations. Right? So it's a whole, and does anybody know what candid means? Be very frank, honest. Mm-hmm. And then there's Robinson Crusoe, Daniel Defoe, which I'm gonna admit I've never read. My father, a wise and brave man, gave me serious and excellent counsel against what he foresaw as my design. He called me one morning into his chamber, where he was confined by the gout, and he expostulated very warmly with me upon this subject. He asked me what reasons more than the mere wandering inclination I had for leaving my father's house and my native country, where I might well be introduced, and had a prospect of raising my fortune by application and industry, with a life of ease and pleasure. Okay, so you see the type of wording that it's using? So it's very fanciful words. It's a lot of words, very fancy words, trying to get to a singular meaning. Okay.
Uh-oh.
The Romantic period. But I don't want you to think romantic in the way that we think now, right? Like, oh, swoon. No.
Yeah.
We think of it as a romantic period because of the way people felt and saw nature and the world. So it's a celebration of nature and the imagination, rejection of organized religion and social conventions. So there's a lot of stories of breaking free of that hierarchical structure, right? I'm not going to be what you want me to be. Inclusion of supernatural and the mythology. So they go back, sometimes they will actually go back in that way classical period, they're gonna pull things from there. And embrace individuality and the inner world. So before, a lot of it was about how do you help your society, how do you help man, how do you fit within that? This one says, no, let's pull it in, okay? One of my favorites, Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, okay? That one is about a girl who's trying to break free of the conformities of society. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and Dracula by Bram Stoker, okay? So you see what I mean? It's not necessarily your like all hugs and kisses romance. There's actually the imagination, right?
It is.
And let's just be clear. Is Frankenstein the name of the monster?
No.
No, the monster has no name, okay?
It's Frankenstein's
Frankenstein is
monster.
the doctor that creates the monster. So when people say I'm dressing up as Frankenstein,
You
they
better
shouldn't be
have
dressing up as the monster, they need to be dressing up as the doctor.
the black and white hair.
Exactly.
It should be called Frankenstein's monster.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Okay, so Pride and Prejudice, Miss Jane Austen, one of my favorites again, I'm going to say. Mr. Bennet was so on a mixture of quick heart, sarcastic humor, reserve, and caprice that the experience of 3 and 20 years had been insufficient to make his wife understand his character. Her mind was less difficult to develop. She was a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper. When she was contented, she fancied herself nervous. The business of her life was to get her daughters married. Its solace was visiting and the news. So it's picking fun at the mother. Two very different people, right? The father's smart and quick-witted. It's portraying the mom as not so much. And the mom's only goal, because all she has is girls, and at that time, girls could not own land or anything. They were only good for getting married. That's her whole mission in life.
Is to get a son.
Is to get her daughters married
Oh.
and God. And not just married, but married well and God.
So.
Yes. So all of Pride and Prejudice that's the whole idea, right? So it's a really cool story. I like it. Okay, Dracula by Bram Stoker. Oh, I forgot the honest. And the poor souls, I can pity them now and weep, as I think of them placid, each in her full sleep of death, for a short moment of our fading. For, friend John, hardly had my knife severed the head of each, before the whole body began to melt away and crumble into its native dust, as though the death that should have come centuries agone had at last exert himself and say at once and loud, I am here.
Poor Bram Stoker. His beautiful creation was turned into a love story.
Yeah. Well, and there is a love story within Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it's not quite the one we see in movies today. Okay. The Victorian period. When everything gets proper again. Okay. So it's called the Victorian period after Queen Victoria of England. And she was very proper. So I want you to think of that as very proper. There was very set rules, especially for women. So characteristics, idealized portraits of difficult lives, right? We're gonna put a nice pretty picture on top of your hard life and make it seem not so much that. Emphasis on hard work, perseverance, love, and luck. So even if you have a hard life, if you work hard, if you have enough luck, it's gonna get better, it's gonna be great. Right? We still hear this today, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Moral lessons and trying to reclaim the past. It is the Make America Great of literature. Just think of it that way, okay? Charles Dickens is one of its most famous writers. Oliver Twist, The Christmas Carol, and The Tale of Two Cities. Have you ever heard the phrase, I want some more, please? Okay, that's from Charles Dickens. And then also Bah Humbug Scrooge, right? Most of you know the Christmas Carol, probably from Scrooge McDuck.
No, the Muppets version.
Oh, and the Muppets version. Can't go wrong with the Muppets version. And unfortunately, the Bronte sisters, who Miss Garcia hates, Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre. When I say I dislike them, you will see how much I dislike them. Also, see, I didn't even realize I was doing that. I lowercase her name.
It's disrespectful.
I know, it's disrespectful. It's okay. I dislike it so much I refuse to put an excerpt. I'm telling you, they made me read it. That's how you know.
Do you just hate the story or the people in the story?
I hate all their stories. The Bronte sisters make me want to bang my head against the desk.
Oh,
Yes, I read it when I was your age, all their stories, because there was a part in high school. And I said, never again will I go through this torture.
What do you want to read?
And then now, it's very popular.
It's probably
I
like
never did.
boring. It's probably like
Everybody
mindless
loves it.
reading.
There's movies galore about them. My mother is a huge Wuthering Heights fan, and she wants to talk to me about it all the time. And I'm like, stab me in my eye. Okay, so for a long time after it was ushered into this world of sorrow and trouble by the parish surgeon, it remained a matter of considerable doubt whether the child would survive to bear any name at all, in which case it is somewhat more than problematic that these memories would never be appeared. Or if they had, that being compromised within a couple of pages, they would have possessed the inestimable merit of being the most concise and faithful specimen of biography extant in the literature of any age or country. Although I am not disposed to maintain that being born in a workhouse is in itself the most fortunate and enviable circumstance that could possibly befall a human being, I do mean to say that in this particular instance, it was the best thing for Oliver Twist that could by possibility have occurred. So he's born in a workhouse. Basically, it's a poor house. He's going to get abandoned, but we're saying that this is the best thing that could happen to him,
So he could
right? So
become this full potential.
yes, that perseverance, that, a bad situation, we're going to put a pretty nice little color on it, and he's going to go up and he's going to be fine. It's all going to be worth it. So that's Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. And this is the infamous scene. Some more, please. So, the modern period. See, now we're getting to where Miss Garcia likes things. Okay. Characteristics, individualism, experimentation and writing, especially when it comes to this woman, and I'll explain it. Absurdity. What's absurdity?
You can't comprehend.
Yeah, it's like so crazy, it's like can't be real. That's absurd.
The picture.
Yeah, and then symbolism and differing perspectives. So this is where you actually start to hear the voices of other people. In particular, women. Okay, and one of those women is Miss Virginia Woolf. To the Lighthouse and a Room of One's Own. Now, Miss Virginia Woolf used to hang out with a whole bunch of guy writers, and she created a type of writing that nobody had seen before, and it's called stream of consciousness. It's basically from the perspective of being inside that person's head. Think of all the thoughts that we have and how our minds and things jump from one item to the next. She does that. She goes from here to here to here, and then she'll have dialogue. So it was a very interesting way of thinking. Joseph Conrad, The Heart of Darkness. So also different perspectives. This is where we start to see other cultures come in, because it starts being written by British novelists that go to the British colonies around the world, such as Africa, right? New Zealand, India. So you start to see those people brought in, but they're not written by those people. It's from the perspective of the British, okay? And then Ernest Hemingway, The Pearl, The Old Man at the Sea, and A Farewell to Arms. He is one of the most well-known American writers. He liked to chill out, drink, hunt, sail. He was a very manly man. And he wrote all of these. These are very popular books. Okay. To the Lighthouse by Miss Virginia Woolf. So with the lights all put out, the moon sunk, and the thin rain drumming on the roof, a downpouring of immense darkness began. Nothing, it seemed, could survive the flood. The profusion of darkness which, creeping into the keyholes and crevices, stole around window blinds, came into bedrooms, swallowed up here a jug and basin, there a bowl of red and yellow lilas, and there the sharp edges and firm bulk of the chest of drawers. Not only was furniture confounded, there was scarcely anything left of body or mind by which one could say, this is he or this is she. Sometimes a hand would raise as if to clutch something or ward off something, or somebody groaned and somebody laughed aloud as if it's sharing a joke with nothingness. So do you see the ramblingness of it? Is that not how your mind works? Right? I don't know about you, but sometimes I start with one topic and by the time I'm done, I'm like, where did I even get to that? Why am I thinking about that, right? That was her writing. And she was a master at it, okay? The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. The old man was thin and gaunt with deep wrinkles on the back of his neck. The brown blotches of benevolent skin cancer the sun brings from his reflection on the tropic seas were on his cheeks. The blotches ran well down the sides of his face, and his hands had deep crease scars from handling heavy fish on the cords, but none of these scars were fresh. They were as old as erosions in a fishless desert. So you see, like, the way that he's writing, it's kind of evoking images, right? He's trying to get you to see something. So again, he tends to be a writer that a lot of guys like. The postmodern period. This is where we're going to be hanging out this minute, right here, the postmodern period. You have unreliable narration. What does unreliable mean?
Can't trust him.
Can't trust them. You can't trust them. Takes a stand against authority. What normally is that authority, do you think?
The man.
The man, the government, society. Okay? Takes on historical and social issues. And so we're definitely going to be right here with that. And then parodies and often does not follow traditional narratives. Parodies are kind of like satires. It's writing about something in a way that's kind of funny. And they don't follow the traditional rules. You have one good, which is Slaughterhouse-Five. One of my favorite books, John Kennedy Toole, Confederacy of Dunces, and Falconet the Fight Club.
Tell me we get to read Fight Club.
No. I actually was looking for an extra for Fight Club, but I was like, I'd like to keep my job.
Oh.
So, because I was like, yeah, we can do that. So this is just an excerpt. I'm not going to read it, but if you actually take a look at it, there's a lot of absurdities in it. It's a very, the guy is actually to where you almost can't believe he's a real guy. And his name is Ignatius. So yeah. How much time do we have left?
Like
5 minutes? 15? Okay. So,
no, more like
Listen, I'm not
12.
really.
so okay.
Yeah, what is it?
Okay.
Listen.
So just some isms real quick. So idealism. How it's achieved is through characters, imagined scenarios, providing set ideals, themes of perfection, and it avoids reality. Because in real life, is everything perfect?
No.
No, right? So its definition is the image of perfection, an imagined representation of subject matter in its most perfect and positive version. So everything's all lovely when it's not. I have two idealisms. This is actually romanticism. My bad. I'll have to fix that. Okay, so think of this as romanticism. Okay, how it's achieved, the glorification of nature and expressions of emotion, appreciation of art and beauty, themes of solitude and reflection, vivid imagery, supernatural elements, avoids harsh realities. There might be some reality in there, but it's just a little sprinkling. Direct expression. So think of it as the age of imagination, a representation of subject matter in a highly imaginative and emotional way.
This dude looks like he would take you to this spot as like a date, and he would say, no, he'd say, look how jagged the rocks are and how much the wind has beat them.
Oh,
But
yeah.
look how beautiful they are. That's
talk
some,
about poetry, come up with a poem.
yeah.
You can be like,
That's
you
some,
are as beautiful. My love is as vast.
yeah, my love is, he looks like that guy.
Like, oh, I guess you are my muse.
And he's like that perfect, like, it kind of reminds me of a romance novel. Like in the, you know, how they always show the guy. And
Yeah.
that's what it reminds me of.
You say
Just-
you are jagged, but look at these rocks. They
Yeah.
are jagged but beautiful.
Realism. We are going to be dealing with a lot of realism, okay? So use of realistic settings, honest depictions of characters, themes based in reality, and depicts the good and bad of human nature, because that's how we are, right? Not everybody is all good and all bad. We're kind of a mix of both. Avoids figurative language, so you're not going to get that really flowery language. It's like, oh, look, hark, over there. No, it's going to be like, this is it. Elaborate imagery, idealism, and avoids romanticism, and avoids sugarcoating events. So there are going to be some things that we read about that you might be like, whoa, that's a little deep, or that's a little like, yeah. Okay, so it's a representation of reality to represent subject matter truthfully and without impartiality, artistic flourishes, or supernatural events. So we're taking all the supernatural pretty much out of it.
I sit at a bar alone.
But it's almost to the fact that it's so real that you wonder if there is supernatural. Okay? Feminism. Frida Kahlo. Okay, examines the role of women, argues against the established and antiquated, emphasize antiquated gender roles of women, fights against gender inequalities in society and politics, and gives women a voice. And avoids accepting gender norms. Right? It's the I am woman, hear me roar. So it's a representation of women to represent subject matter that is written by, is produced by, or pertains to women. Okay? So sometimes you will actually see feminist work where their characters are not necessarily women, but they're giving their messages through those characters. Okay, make sense? Totally. Okay, so we rushed through all that. All so that I can tell you, I haven't done, I'm going to give you the quiz tomorrow because I do want you to start reading. Well,
Fight Club.
technically it's tomorrow, but I'm
I'm
going
gonna
to
read
short
Fight
you
Club
anyway.
regardless.
I already read it.
So this is the book that you guys are going to be reading. It's only 3 chapters that I've pulled for you, and it's over the Vietnam War. And it's the things they carried. We're going to actually start reading this tomorrow, so get for, like, you're going to start reading it tomorrow. But if you want to take a look at it today, it is in your OneNote, and I also have it here. But it's in, and I'll make it accessible to you guys, okay? It's also, from now on, whenever we have a book, so, yep, haters. If you look on the very main page, there is now a section called books. If you click on it, not only do I have the PDF for you to be able to read, here are the audio videos for them. Okay?
They're all like 3 different people.
Got it. I couldn't find one
This
read by
dude-
all the same people
This dude couldn't read the whole book.
because it is technically a book of short stories that fit together, but I have chosen 3 of them for you, and that's why you have different. Sound fair though? The first pack is only like 36 pages. We're going to be working on it for about 2 weeks.
Are you gonna be reading like entire books this year?
The last one, I'm going to give you a set of 4 books to choose from, and hopefully you will read the entire book.
They better be like Mr. Gillum books good, like
Well, actually,
Monster.
I don't know if I'm going to
Hear
have.
me out, hear me out. Back to Seuss.
Right? So here's what I was thinking about doing, especially for this particular class, is when it comes time to that, I'm going to offer 4 books for you guys to read, but however, I am going to give you the opportunity to say, no, there's a different book I want to read, but you'd have to be able to tell me what period it comes from, those types of things. And so,
Fight
Okay.
Club. No, I'm kidding.
you could if you wanted to,
Yes, sir.
okay?
And then I can tell my mom, Mom, it's for a project.
But
I'm allowed to
it
read
is your own,
this.
yeah, it's your own.
Pretty much.
So does that sound fair?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. All right, guys, that's it for today.
What did you say?